In 2017, before the passing of the Queen, Princess Anne sat down with Chris Shipp, the ITV royal editor and Sunrise contributor. The story begins, as so many royal tales do, in quiet. A chill lingered over Balmoral Castle as news spread that King Charles III had suffered a serious decline. At 76, after years of controversy and criticism, he now faced the one opponent no monarch can avoid: time. Doctors arrived discreetly. Senior royals were summoned in private. The public, left with grainy photos and speculative headlines, waited. But inside the castle walls, something far more intimate unfolded. Not a speech, not a proclamation, but a whispered, late-night conversation between the king and Princess Anne, the sibling he trusted most. She was the last to leave his chamber. When she emerged, she was pale, calm, and silent. For weeks, she said nothing as the world mourned. William stepped forward, Harry stayed in California, and Queen Camilla seemed more powerful than ever. Then, at 74, Anne finally spoke. At a private family gathering in Windsor, she opened a secure case and revealed a folded note written in Charles's hand. The ink had faded, the paper worn at the edges. It bore no signature, no crest, only 7 stark lines that changed everything. "Tell them I only trust William. Keep Camilla out of succession and don't let Harry back in. The crown isn't a game. I have made my peace. Do what I can't. Choose duty, not blood." The room went still. William stared without a word. Harry flushed with anger. Camilla rose, silent, and walked away. For the first time, the monarchy had spoken beyond death, and Anne had been chosen as its messenger. Charles's final days carried both dignity and unease. He did not collapse dramatically. Instead, he faded quietly at Balmoral, just as his mother had. Rumors of failing health, weight loss, memory lapses, exhaustion had been whispered for months. Cancelled engagements, something Charles hated, signaled the truth. Though the palace tried to control appearances, the reality was sobering. Scotland offered the privacy the family needed as the king's health declined. In his last private meetings, Charles spoke candidly with William, telling him, "You are ready, but not everyone will want you to be." Harry was not summoned right away, a decision that raised eyebrows. Only after a call from Princess Anne did he return, arriving without Meghan, who was kept at a distance. Through it all, Camilla remained close to Charles, protective and watchful, attempting to control access as he drifted in and out of clarity. Some aides claimed she even blocked messages meant for the king. But she could not block Anne, who lived by one principle above all: duty. And in the end, it was Anne who carried her brother's final words, the 7 lines that redefined loyalty, succession, and the fragile balance between blood and responsibility. But before we continue, we'd love for you to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying this video. If you just did, we truly appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the main content. On the final evening of his life, long after the castle halls had gone quiet, Charles asked for Anne. The 2 siblings spoke privately for nearly 40 minutes. No attendants, no physicians, just brother and sister. What was said remained a secret until much later. When Anne left his room, her steps were measured, her face calm. She returned to her quarters and locked a folded note in her personal case without stopping to speak to William or Harry. By morning, Charles was gone. The palace confirmed his passing with ritual formality, somber statements, flags at half-mast, and a portrait of the king in full uniform. Tributes poured in from leaders and citizens alike. But within the royal household, grief mingled with unease. Harry grew resentful at being excluded from updates on the king's final moments and left out of private briefings. At the funeral, when he approached Anne, she acknowledged him only with a brief nod. William, by contrast, became quieter, more focused, as if carrying a burden that no one else could shoulder. 10 days later, at Windsor Castle, The family gathered for what was officially described as a private meeting to review duties and ensure stability after the transition. But Anne had come with a different purpose. Entering the chamber with her usual composed presence, she carried the same case she had locked in her apartments the night Charles died. Around the table sat William and Kate, Harry, Camilla, and 2 senior advisors. Anne placed a worn letter before them. Its seal was already broken, the handwriting instantly recognizable. Charles's sharp, deliberate script. "These were his last instructions," Anne said quietly. "He told me to wait until the ceremonies were over, until we were all here, and the noise had settled." She then read the 7 lines aloud. They were direct, without flourish or ambiguity. "I trust William. Only William. Keep Camilla from succession. Do not bring Harry back. The crown is not a game. I have made my peace. Do what I cannot. Choose duty over blood." The room froze. Kate lowered her eyes, struggling with tears. William sat unmoving, transfixed by the page. Harry, his voice breaking, rose and protested that his father could never have written such words. Anne looked at him steadily and replied, "He did. I heard it myself. He said it twice, and he asked me to carry it forward, no matter the cost." Harry's hands shook. Camilla flushed red and muttered something before slipping out. In those 7 sentences, Charles had defined his legacy, not in public speeches or ceremonial acts, but in blunt instructions meant only for his family. He had entrusted the future of the crown to William alone, warned against Camilla's influence, and effectively closed the door on Harry's return. Some say Anne hesitated before sharing the note, torn between protecting her brother's memory and safeguarding the institution. In the end, her sense of duty prevailed. "This isn't about punishment," she told them. "It's about preserving what he spent his life defending. He made his choice. I'm only carrying it out." When she returned the letter to her case, silence filled the room. There was no debate, no vote, only the heavy realization that the late king's word now stood as law. William's authority solidified. Camilla's ambitions faded into the background. And Harry, perhaps for the first time, understood that he hadn't just stepped away from the monarchy. He had been locked out for good. The note had changed everything. Even William, who had long practiced the art of composure, seemed unsettled. Harry, unable to contain himself, muttered, "He betrayed me. Even in death, he betrayed me." The words landed heavy, his voice breaking, not from fragility, but from the sheer weight of years of resentment. He had always been the spare. He had endured humiliation, exclusion, and a lifetime of watching his father choose silence instead of support. What stung most was the phrase, "Do not let Harry back in." Not guidance, not concern, not protection, just finality, cold and absolute. A door slammed shut forever. Harry pressed on, his voice shaking as he turned toward William. "You know he froze me out. And now this note, it's the final nail, isn't it?" William stayed silent. Kate, seated beside him, placed her hand gently on his knee, a quiet gesture meant to calm the storm. But Harry wasn't lashing out. He was bleeding pain that had been buried too long. Looking to Anne, he demanded, "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why wait?" Anne, steady as ever, replied without hesitation. "Because that was his wish. You had your chance. You delayed, and when you arrived, he was already gone. This was never mine to change. It was his to decide." Her words cut deeper than the note itself. Insiders later revealed that Harry withdrew almost completely in the days after. He avoided royal dinners, skipped engagements, and kept to himself. Back in California, Meghan issued no direct statement, but her allies did. One source told the press, "They exploited a dying man." Charles wasn't speaking from the heart. He was cornered by the institution. The palace rejected this outright. Senior aides insisted Charles may have been weakened, but he was not confused. If anything, his thoughts at the end were sharper than ever. For Charles, Harry wasn't just a son. He was a symbol of rejection, a reminder of wounds inflicted by books, interviews, and relentless criticism. In his final moments, Charles made a choice no father wishes to make. He put the crown above his child. As one commentator bluntly observed, he saved the monarchy, but destroyed what little bond remained. Harry left Windsor empty-handed. He came for closure, but received something far harsher, an unspoken exile. Not through scandal, not by argument, but by 7 unyielding lines of ink. To him, that was the ultimate betrayal. While the public mourned with tributes and parades, a quieter transformation was underway inside palace walls. William did not ascend with fanfare or pageantry. There were no golden carriages or balcony waves. Instead, he stepped forward like a shadow becoming substance, silent, steady, undeniable. When Anne revealed Charles's final note, the family didn't debate. The shift happened instantly, without resistance. The monarchy had chosen, and William, long prepared, assumed his role as if the crown had always been resting on his shoulders. It wasn't theatrical, one aide explained. It was calm, efficient, and frightening in its precision. William's position crystallized overnight. His secretary was elevated to liaise directly with government leaders. His security doubled. He was relocated into the Queen's former strategy rooms, a space once reserved only for sovereigns. And most telling of all, his signature began to appear on documents that belonged solely to the monarch. The transition was complete, not with ceremony but with certainty. No formal statement was given to the press. Officially, William was described as merely helping guide the transition. Yet within palace walls, everyone understood the truth. Charles had handed him the reins of power before he even drew his last breath. And not everyone accepted it. Camilla, in particular, was said to be furious. She had expected a larger role in the transition, perhaps even a formal seat on the Regency Advisory Council. But once Charles's words became known, keep Camilla out of succession, her influence evaporated. Invitations to strategy briefings stopped coming, and appearances with William and Kate quietly disappeared from her schedule. When she demanded answers, Anne reportedly told her bluntly, "Your place was beside the king. The king is gone." The machinery of monarchy moved forward without pause. Inside Clarence House, routines shifted into post-Charles protocol. William's staff were instructed to bypass old channels and report directly to him. Lawyers began preparing succession papers, not for some distant day, but for the present. A defining moment came soon after at St. George's Chapel, where a private family gathering was held. The press was excluded. Only the core royals were present when William received the sovereign signet ring, a symbol usually reserved for coronations. Anne stood silently as witness. An aide later described it as the quietest coronation in living memory. William said little. He accepted the ring, nodded toward Anne, and embraced Kate. From the side, young George was overheard asking, "Are you king now?" William answered softly, "Not yet, but I'm ready." It wasn't spectacle that marked the transfer of power. It was conviction. William didn't grab authority, nor was it forced upon him. It was entrusted to him by his father. From that moment, the monarchy had shifted its weight. The crown itself had not moved, but the authority had. Word of Charles's final wish did not stay hidden for long. Within days of the Windsor meeting, details leaked across Britain and the Commonwealth. The headlines confirmed what had once been whispered. Princess Anne had carried her brother's last words into the future. The public response was striking. Rather than scandal or outrage, there was respect. Many praised Anne for her straightforward honesty. In an age dominated by public relations and polished speeches, she was seen as a rare figure who told the truth without spin. "She's been doing the work quietly for decades," one BBC commentator noted. If Anne says Charles wrote it, the country believes her. On social media, #trust, Anne trended for 3 consecutive days. Newspapers across the political spectrum, The Times, The Telegraph, even The Guardian, all commended her. Meanwhile, William's popularity surged, with polls showing a sharp rise in support and calls for him to formally assume the crown sooner rather than later. As one caller on LBC radio put it, "We've waited long enough. William is the future, and Anne has just cleared the way." Still, not everyone approved. Outlets sympathetic to the Sussexes painted the revelation as a calculated move to sideline Harry permanently. A California-based blog accused Anne of shaping Charles's legacy to silence dissent. Meghan's supporters claimed Harry's emotional reaction had been weaponized. But in Britain, those arguments found little traction. Most of the public had grown weary of royal infighting. Anne's simple approach, without tears, without grandstanding, cut through the noise. She hadn't tried to glorify herself or dramatize the moment. She had simply done what she always did, her duty. Even critics of the monarchy admitted she handled the matter with rare composure. As one broadcaster bluntly remarked, "It may be the most honest moment the royals have given us in years." A Guardian columnist, usually critical of monarchy itself, conceded, "If power must be inherited, better it pass through someone who has earned the nation's trust through service, not just through status." That's Anne. Across Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, news outlets highlighted Anne's decades of public duty, thousands of engagements, her refusal to burden her children with titles, and her plain-spoken honesty. Even in Scotland, where Republican sentiment had been on the rise, her name was spoken with rare admiration. One commentator summed it up. "She tells it straight. If the monarchy survives, it'll be because of people like her, not palaces and crowns." In a matter of weeks, the atmosphere inside the palace shifted completely. The Sussexes fell silent. Camilla stepped back from the spotlight. William and Kate began stepping into a more visible leadership role, buoyed by a public that, for once, seemed firmly behind them. And at the center of it all was Anne, the overlooked royal who reminded the world that authority doesn't come from sitting on a throne. It comes from telling the truth. And Anne had done just that. With steady hands, a clear voice, and a fragile sheet of paper, she revealed 7 lines written in fading ink by a dying king. The nation believed her. Charles may have slipped away quietly, but his final act spoke louder than decades of speeches. In those lines, he did what few monarchs dared. He broke with tradition to secure the future. By entrusting William alone, and by drawing a boundary against Harry, he reshaped not just the family, but the monarchy itself. It wasn't softened for comfort or cloaked in ceremony. It was stark, decisive, and irreversible. Anne became the vessel of that choice, the executor of a truth too heavy for anyone else to carry. For years, she had labored in the background, overlooked while others drew headlines. But in that moment, she delivered the monarchy's most unvarnished truth, without tears, without theatrics, without favoritism. William now stands as the institution's center of gravity. He has not been formally crowned, but he has been confirmed, not by ceremony or by public spectacle, but by the father who shaped him and, in the end, trusted him. He carries it with the gravity of a man who knows what it means. Harry, by contrast, has drifted further from the fold, not cast out by decree, but excluded by decision. Still a prince in title, but no longer in purpose, a reality he may never accept. Camilla has been silenced. Meghan has been angered. But the institution itself feels steadier than it has in years, because at Windsor, history turned not on a parade or proclamation, but on a whisper. One note, one breath, and one sister who placed duty above all else. This is Charles's legacy, not measured in pomp or reform, but in clarity. And it is William's inheritance, not overshadowed by his father's reign, but illuminated by his final truth. The monarchy has not merely survived, it has emerged stronger, reshaped, and ready,